In 1969, the Alice Cooper Band released a debut album called Pretties for You, and it wasn't that good. It was a different sound than we know from the band. It was more of a psychedelic rock album. Then 1 year later, they released their follow-up, Easy Action, and it's still not that good, but a step in the right direction because the year after that, they would release Love It to Death, which is one of their masterpieces. So in today's video, I want to focus on Easy Action, what went wrong, what went right, and is it better than you remember? Easy Action was released on March 27, 1970 under Frank Zappa's Straight Records label. The album title was inspired from a line from the musical West Side Story, as the band were big fans of that movie. The album continues with a sound they had on their previous album called Pretties for You, but you could also hear hints of their hard rock sound, and they would be perfecting that on the album after that. I'll be talking about all the songs later, and you'll notice there will be a few songs where you hear that classic Alice Cooper sound start to come out. The album also has a few hidden gems, including a very Beatles-sounding track that was not even sung by Alice or Vincent himself. The album was produced by David Briggs. He was known for his work with Neil Young. He really wasn't that much of an asset for the group, and I'll be talking about that why later. The album itself, Easy Action, came from the film version of the West Side Story. It's said during the song named Cool in the West Side Story movie, and the scene features two rival street gangs who they face off, and one of the characters, his name is Ice, he tries to calm them down. Then the character Action, he attempts to attack, then Ice pulls him back, saying Easy Action. So the band also will be making more references to the movie in their School's Out album, but I'll save that for another video. Let me start off by talking about everything that went wrong with this album. The biggest problem was the band had a lack of musical direction. The album really didn't have an identity. I don't know if it wanted to be a hard rock album or is it a psychedelic rock album. And for that reason, it was not as memorable as their next album, Love to Death, which I can't stop talking about it because I love this album right here. And I know we're only like 2 minutes into the video. But the next problem was the weak production. It was partially the fault of producer David Briggs. He didn't like the kind of music they were playing. He called it psychedelic shit. And when you have a producer who doesn't put his heart into the work, it's not really going to come out that good. And the next problem was the album lacked a strong single. The lead single was called Shoe Salesman, and it wasn't memorable enough. And that's why the album really didn't take off. And because of that, it led to weak sales. The next problem was that they were not on the right label. It was released on Frank Zappa's Straight Records label, and the band felt like they were not the best fit for the band, as that label catered more to experimental artists. So for that reason, they moved to Warner Brothers after this album. All the above factors led to some negative critical reviews. So for example, there was one review in the Village Voice. It was highly critical, and it said, and I quote, "Tuneless singing, tuneless playing, tuneless tunes, and pseudo musique concrete." Finally, if you look back on this album 55 years later, you'll see that the band, as well as the artist Alice Cooper, had lots of albums that were much better than this. Therefore, it's more of a transitional album. Despite the negativity, Easy Action also did a few things right. For example, it still had a very unique sound. You could hear some of their hard rock sounds start to come out in a few of the songs. The lyrics were darker and a lot darker than Pretties for You. You can even hear Alice start to use his raspy vocal styles on a few of the tracks. The album still has a few tracks that hold up pretty well, such as Mr. and Misdemeanor and Return of the Spiders. In addition, some songs lack melody, just seem to be very experimental. There are other songs that have a tight arrangement. And there were a few ballads that the band will be known for doing much later on. There's also a song that has a very noticeable Beatles influence, and I kept hinting at it, but this one has Michael Bruce on vocals, and I'll talk more about that later as I go track by track before I end the video. The album opens with Mr. and Misdemeanor. It's actually a pretty good song because I believe it's the first time we hear Alice Cooper doing his raspy vocal style that he will be doing throughout the rest of his career. So that's something that was pretty cool. I also like the fact there are parts of the song that remind me of the band The Doors. It had lots of psychedelic keyboards, different elements, and probably one of the stronger songs on the album. The song also features references to characters such as Lucky Luciano, who is an Italian-American mobster, and Kenneth Passarelli, who was actually one of the band's crew members, and he later co-wrote Rocky Mountain Way by Joe Walsh. Alice Cooper also mentioned that the lyrics for the song were written after a Los Angeles earthquake, and he made up a word called agoshin, suggesting the Earth's movement. Shoe Salesman has producer David Briggs on piano, and I like the song. It's almost like a grungy type of song. It sounds like something that could have come out in the 90s, and if you read the lyrics, it appears to be about heroin, because there's one line where it says, he shows me the marks on his arm. So I'm assuming it's about that. But I actually think it's a pretty good song. You can hear some similarities between this song and some of Neil Young's music that he was doing at the time with Crazy Horse. And I thought you could hear that in the guitar tone because they were similar. The next song was called Still No Air. It was one of those psychedelic songs that reminded me a lot of something from Pink Floyd's The Piper at the Gates of Dawn album. It was another one that just made reference to West Side Story in the lyrics, but otherwise, it was a decent track, but it was just one of the very psychedelic ones. Below Your Means is the first track with Michael Bruce on vocals. It's one of those long, extended jam sessions. It sounds a lot like psychedelic rock. It has a pretty cool fuzzy guitar tone. I like that part about it. I also feel it's kind of a long song because it's about 7 minutes long. And it has these long instrumental parts, and not one of my favorites, but it's okay. Then there is Return of the Spiders. This is a song that Neil Smith cites as his favorite from the album, and one of the few songs that has some heavy guitars and more of a hard rock sound. I read that the drumming was influenced by that song Wipeout by the Surfaris, and if you listen to the song, you can hear it. It's one of the songs that sounds like classic Alice Cooper. He does those raspy vocals on this as well, and I also read a few comments saying it's an early example of punk rock. So it's a really good song. It's very fast-paced, energetic, and it really stands out on this album. Laughing at Me was a pretty cool song. It reminded me of a combination of some psychedelic Beatles mixed with the classic sound of the Alice Cooper band. I thought it was a decent song and maybe one of the better ones. There's a song called Refrigerator Heaven, and it has some lyrics that are pretty ahead of their time, let's just say, about a cancer patient being cryogenically frozen. It's a type of song much different from what audiences were accustomed to at the time. But as for the song, it had lots of weird psychedelic parts, and sounds like it could have been an extra track from Pretties for You. But the fact that the lyrics were very ahead of its time, I thought that was pretty cool. It's kind of showing us what's to come with the shock rock factor. Then there's Beautiful Fly Away, the second track with Michael Bruce on vocals. And this is the song I've been hinting at for this entire video. Because if you listen to it, and let's say you're listening to the radio and this comes on, you don't know it's an Alice Cooper band song. You might think it's a lost Beatles song or something from a Paul McCartney solo album. That's what it sounds like. And that's why I like it a lot. It just sounds just very Beatles-esque. That's like a good word for it. The last song is called Lay Down and Die, Goodbye. It's a 7.5 minute closer. It's very weird. A lot of people compare it to a Frank Zappa type of song. I thought the song brings down the album a bit because it's very long. It doesn't have any melody. It's a lot of psychedelic noise. I read a few comments of people saying they like it, but for me, I thought it was just long and kind of boring. So in conclusion, the album has a lot of highs, but also has some tracks that are difficult to get through, and that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think of Easy Action. If you want to learn more about the album before this, which is Pretties for You, I did a video on that. I'll stick that right there for you to watch next. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.